Brill and the Dragators by Peggy Downing. Illustrated by Feiza. Chapter 7. Disaster! On the day of the planned escape, Brill arose before dawn and went out to meet Segra. Dew lay heavily on the grass and shrubs. The air was bitterly cold. The eastern sky began to show light as Segra and Brill walked quietly through the forest to the spot where they had first seen Peachy. Peachy was there, but another larger Dragator lay beside him. Brill whispered, "We can't go down there now. Peachy has company."
"This is the only time we have. I'll go if you've changed your mind."
"You said you tried to throw the rope yesterday, but it wouldn't catch on the tree. I have to go," Brill sighed, wondering again why he had let himself get involved in Segra's dangerous plan. "I wish I had a sword."
"You can't chop up one of Peachy's friends," cried Segra. "Swords don't solve problems. They only create worse ones."
Segra climbed down the rope. Peachy waddled toward her, rubbing his scaly head against her legs. Segra took the produce from her sack, cabbages, carrots, and his favorite, peaches. Brill watched the other Dragator warily. He wished he knew what was going on in his small reptile brain. As Brill descended the rope, Segra tossed food to the other Dragator. He chomped on it eagerly. Brill didn't like his pointed teeth. Segra knelt beside Peachy, talking to him as if he could understand.
"I want you to take Brill across the moat. He's going to throw a rope around a tree at the far bank, so the king can climb up the other side. Tonight is the night of the escape, remember?"
"He can't understand," Brill interrupted. "Come on, let's get it over with." Brill took off his shoes and stockings and put the coil of rope over one shoulder. He forced his mind to concentrate on the details of what he was doing rather than on the dangers. Peachy slipped into the water and waited by the shore. Brill climbed on his back.
"Squeeze your knees against his body. That'll hold you on,"
advised Segra. Brill nodded. The water felt icy cold on his bare feet and legs. Brill couldn't tell how much of his shivering was from the cold and how much was from fear. Peachy's sharp scales scratched his bare skin, but the thought of other Dragators cruising along looking for breakfast bothered him the most. Peachy headed straight across the moat and stopped by a ledge on the other side. Brill hopped off. He had tied the rope in a lasso, and he threw it toward the tree he and Segra had agreed looked the strongest. He missed. Again and again he threw, and missed. His arm ached from the effort. Perspiration ran down his face. "I'll be ready in a minute," he called to Peachy. "Now I'm doing it," he thought, talking to that stupid Dragator just as if he can understand me. But how did he know where to take me? And how does he know to wait for me? Brill pushed the puzzling questions from his mind and threw the lasso once more. It caught on the tree, and Brill pulled it tight. He climbed a little way up the bank to be sure the rope would hold. It seemed firm. Excitement burst in Brill's mind as an idea came. Why didn't he go with the king? He needed someone to help him. They could hide near his mother's farm. He longed to see his mother again. A happy picture flashed in his mind. He was sitting by the fireplace telling his mother about his adventures. Brill dropped back to the beach, satisfied the rope was secure. He climbed on Peachy's back, patted his scaly head, and said, "Good job." Peachy swam toward the other side, but as they came to the middle of the moat, Brill saw 3 large Dragators swimming toward them. The one in the lead opened his mouth and bellowed. Brill crouched low on Peachy's back. If only they could reach the shore before the Dragators began chewing on his bare legs. "Hurry, Peachy," he whispered. The lead Dragator swam fast, and he came up beside them, looking up at Brill. "He doesn't look as if he'd be satisfied with my leg. He wants all of me. If I still had my rope, I'd lasso him and tie his mouth shut. I don't have any way to defend myself. Dear God, please help me. You're the only one who can." The 3 Dragators closed in on Peachy, and Brill braced himself for the pain of sharp teeth biting his flesh and crunching his bones. He would scream and shout, and Segra would see he was not brave at all. But it wouldn't matter what she thought after he was dead. They came closer to shore, and still the Dragators had not bitten him. Brill began to hope. Perhaps the strange Dragators knew he was Peachy's friend. Peachy stopped by the beach, and Brill scrambled onto dry land. He grabbed his shoes and stockings, rushed to the rope, and climbed up. Segra was sitting on top of the bank waiting for him.
"It's all worked out perfectly,"
she exclaimed. "Oh, yes." Brill sat down beside her to put on his shoes. "I only got scared out of my wits by those big Dragators following us back."
"But they didn't hurt you."
"No, maybe they weren't hungry, but my heart is still beating like a drum. I expected to feel teeth any minute."
"The other Dragators never bothered me when I rode Peachy,"
said Segra.
"We'd better get back to the palace."
As they walked, Brill said, "Let me tell you my idea. I've decided to escape with the king. He'll need someone to help him, so I'm going too."
"We can ask the king if he wants a companion."
Segra's eyes sparkled.
"A king should have 2 servants. We'll both go. It would be wonderful to see my parents again."
"Great idea." Segra was silent for a minute, then her face clouded.
"I'm afraid it will make things too complicated. Peachy can only carry 1 person at a time, and it will take too long to get us all across the moat. Let's wait and go another night. Nothing must interfere with the king's escape."
Brill frowned. "Now that I've started thinking about going home, I can't bear to stay here."
"I'll pray that God will help us know what he wants us to do."
They returned to the palace. After breakfast, Prince Grosstare and Brill went to the play park. The prince complained. "What's the matter with you, Brill? You act as if your mind is a million miles away." "I was trying to think of some new games for us to play." "What kind?" "Guessing games, the kind you're so good at." "I'm bored with this silly play park. Let's go back to the palace." Brill found it hard to think about amusing the prince when his mind was so full of plans for going home. He hoped he could convince the king to take him along, but if not, he'd go the next night. He imagined walking into his house, surprising his mother and grandfather. He could hide in the cave under Black Rock until the Emperor's soldiers gave up looking for him. "Brill, why aren't you listening to me?" shouted the prince. Sorry, Your Highness. I was just trying to think of some riddles for my new game." "But if you make it up, you'll know all the answers and you'll beat me," pointed out Grosstare. "I could never win playing against you, Your Highness. With your genius-level intelligence, no one can beat you. I wish I were half as clever as you." Brill had learned that a liberal dose of flattery could always soothe the prince's rumpled feelings. The day dragged by. Finally, the prince announced that he was going to bed, and Brill escaped into his bedroom. He opened his curtains. When the moon was high in the sky, he and Segra planned to slip out of the palace. Brill tried to swallow the sour taste that came from his scared stomach. Brill took off his clothes and put on his homespun tunic. It felt much scratchier than he remembered. Over his homespuns, he put on his palace clothes. He'd be ready to leave if he got the chance. He couldn't walk down a road with his bright-colored silk clothes without attracting attention. The full moon rode high in the sky, and Brill guessed it was close to midnight. Hopefully everyone in the palace was asleep, except for a few guards. He left his room and glided down to the small door opening to the garden. He looked around, didn't see anyone, and hurried through the garden and orchard, stumbling a couple of times on tree roots. He picked a couple of peaches for Peachy. Without his help, their plan couldn't succeed. Brill found Segra hiding in the woods near the prison.
"I just saw the guard make his rounds," she whispered. "Now is the time to move."
They crossed the clearing around the prison. Brill climbed the tree, tied the rope around the trunk, and lowered it to the courtyard. The king had placed his bench near the tree, and he climbed on it. He tied the rope around his waist and began climbing the wall, depending on the rope, which Brill held taut. He grabbed a tree branch, and Brill reached down to take his hand. Silently, Brill guided him to the top of the wall. With the help of the tree branches and the rope, the king climbed down to freedom. Brill untied the rope from the tree and dropped beside him. Brill coiled the rope as Segra led the way to the woods. When they were away from the prison, Segra spoke.
"We've made it this far. Now all you have to do, Your Majesty, is get across the moat."
"Are you sure this Dragator is reliable?" he asked.
"Peachy has taken both Brill and me for rides,"
answered Segra. Brill felt his heart pounding as he asked his important question. "Would you like me to come with you?" "It would be wonderful to have your company," replied the king. "But if they caught us, it would mean your execution. I can't let that happen." "But I could help you watch for soldiers." "It's best that I go alone. One person can hide easier than two." Brill pouted. "But I could look for food for you." Segra spoke sharply.
"There's no time to argue now, Brill. We have to do what King Talder thinks is best."
She handed the king a sack.
"Here's some food."
The king smiled his gratitude and tied the cloth sack to his belt. Brill said, "Segra and I will escape tomorrow night. Maybe we'll find you." Segra shook her head.
"I've changed my mind. When the king collects an army of rebels, he'll need someone he can trust in the palace. I'll stay here."
"You're a very brave girl," said the king. "You're both brave," he added. At the moat, they looked down to see Peachy sleeping on the narrow beach. Segra asked,
"Your Majesty, will anyone know you're gone before morning?"
"I hope not, but sometimes the interrogators come in the night. They have this strange idea that I know where a treasure is hidden. I suppose they think I'll tell them things when I'm half asleep that I wouldn't tell them when I'm fully awake."
"You never know when they're coming?"
asked Segra. "No, but they haven't been bothering me much lately." Segra turned to Brill.
"Would you climb that maple tree? From there you can see if anything unusual occurs at the prison."
Brill nodded. "If I call hurry, you know I see soldiers. If I call danger, it means they're heading this way." Brill climbed the tree and found a fat limb to sit on. He was well hidden by the leaves, and he had a good view of the moat. Segra and King Talder climbed down the rope toward the water. Brill noticed how slowly the king moved. How was he going to keep away from the soldiers who would be sent to search for him? He was too old to run. Segra woke up Peachy and fed him a peach. It was all up to the Dragator now. Brill glanced toward the prison. Burning torches moved about the grounds. Brill's heart pounded. Had they discovered the king's escape? "Hurry!" he called. Segra talked to Peachy and he moved to the water. The king climbed on his back and Peachy swam. Brill saw more torches around the prison. Figures were fanning out through the woods. Some were running along the moat. They'd see the king. "Danger! Danger!" Brill shouted. Why didn't Peachy swim faster? Why didn't Segra climb up the rope? The soldiers were coming closer. "Hide, Segra, hide!" screamed Brill. There was nowhere to hide on the narrow beach. Brill saw more soldiers with torches across the moat. The king wouldn't have a chance to escape. Brill looked at Peachy silhouetted against the moon-washed water. He had reached the middle of the moat with the king. He wouldn't know that all those torches meant danger. Peachy dived under the water. Oh no, that stupid Peachy doesn't know that human beings can't stay underwater as long as he can. He's going to drown the king. Brill closed his eyes in horror. Then Brill heard soldiers calling to one another near his tree. "I saw him, out in the water." "Swimming across, eh?" "No, he was riding a Dragator." "You've been drinking too much wine." "I saw them, but now they're both gone." "If King Talder escapes, the Dragators will get fat on soldiers." "He won't escape. The Dragators eat anything that lands in that moat." "Hey, look, there's a girl down there." "Where?" "In the shadow of the cliff, trying to hide." "There's a rope. Hey, girl, come on up. We want to ask you some questions." Brill felt paralyzed in his tree. There were 10 soldiers below him, all armed with spears. If only he had a sword, but even so, he couldn't fight 10 men. He watched as Segra dived into the moat. One of the soldiers cursed and climbed down the rope. Another followed. They jumped in after Segra. Brill wished Peachy would come back. He'd scare the soldiers and rescue Segra. But Peachy didn't appear. The soldiers grabbed Segra and hauled her, kicking and screaming, back to the shore. Roughly, they bound her hands and feet and carried her to the prison. Brill thought, "If I stay free, I can help her escape and we can go home together." But he had a terrible fear that when the Emperor heard of her treachery, he would order her thrown in the moat. The attempted escape had been a complete disaster. Peachy had drowned the king, and Segra had been captured. Brill had to help her escape before she was executed, but how could he accomplish such an impossible task by himself? End of chapter 7.